Good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining from. Welcome to our INSEAD Tech Talk. I'm Satyaki. I'm an MBA student here and the co-president of the AGI Club at INSEAD. Today's webinar is part of the Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. Before we dive into Philippe's research, let me go over some basic housekeeping rules. The audience is muted. The video and chat functions are disabled. Should you have any questions for our speaker, please use the Q&A tab on your right. Questions should be short and to the point, and to help us identify the most relevant questions, please feel free to vote on the existing questions that you have. This webinar will be recorded, and in a couple of weeks, you will find it at our official YouTube channel. Lastly, should you encounter any technical issues, please email at digital@insead.edu. So now I would like to introduce Professor Philippe Aghion. He's a professor at Collège de France and INSEAD, also a visiting professor at the London School of Economics and fellow of the Econometric Society and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Research. His research specializes in the economics of growth. He's also a co-pioneer of the Schumpeterian growth paradigm with Peter Howitz. But today, he will focus on presenting the findings of a report titled AI, Our Ambition for France, which was presented to President Emmanuel Macron in 2024, that Professor Philippe co-chaired. He will explore how AI can enhance France's competitiveness, the importance of investment in AI research, and the policies needed to ensure inclusive growth. So I will request Professor Philippe to turn on the video and continue with the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. So it's a pleasure to be here. As you kindly mentioned, I was co-chairing a committee on AI for President Macron, and that's the report that we handed over to President Macron in March 2024, and it's called AI, Our Ambition for France, okay? And so it was the result of like about 6 months of work, on intensive work, by a wonderful commission. And in that commission, we had wonderful members. We had Yann LeCun, who has been a key, he's been a Turing Prize, and he's been a key, pioneer of AI, of the AI revolution. We had Arthur Manch and Joël Varocco. Joël Varocco also has been a very important researcher in AI, and with Arthur Manch, they created and Arthur Manch created a firm called Mistral, but Arthur Manch was a student of Gaël Varocco. We had also other, members also all very prestigious, like Joël Barral, who is now working at Google, and we had other very prestigious members. We had a very important union member. We had, it was a very good commission. And in 6 months, we produced this report. And the report has starts, with the whole economic section, and I will emphasize here in my presentation the economics of AI. What are the economic impacts of AI? What can we expect? There are big debates on that. And then I will end up talking a bit about the recommendations and the philosophy of the report, okay? And then you can read the report. But I will give you kind of key elements that can help you, read the report. So what I will do without further ado is to share screens and to should I have this one? I have diaporama. That's the one, no? Can you see my share screen? Okay. So should we fear AI? Okay. So the history of AI is over 70 years old. As early as 1950, the British mathematician and cryptologist Alan Turing was interested in the ability of a machine to imitate a conversation. It was a few years later, in 1956, that the term artificial intelligence first appeared. AI first developed in the form of deductive rules of the if something, then something type, logical. It is the so-called symbolic approach based on reasoning and instructions. Although this symbolic approach has not been abandoned, a statistical approach to AI gained ground since the 1990s, particularly with the advent of machine learning. Unlike the symbolic approach, the human does not determine a set of if something, then something rules. Instead, they ensure that the computer learns to identify statistical relationships between data. So there is no explicit human instruction. The machine is trained to recognize links from a set of training data. The machine then applies these links to new data to perform a task. So the success of the statistical approach relies on two essential ingredients: data on the one hand and computing power on the other hand. So that's very important to keep in mind: data, computing power. And this is the front page of the report, the way we presented it to President Macron in March 2024. Okay, so now the AI revolution, it's no surprise. It affects all domains of activity. It's what we call really a general purpose technology revolution. It affects the economy, it affects public services, it affects the organization of work, media, culture. And in particular, the emergence of generative AI represents an unprecedented acceleration in the overall AI revolution. By generating text, images, sounds at an extraordinarily high speed and with a stunning degree of realism. To just give you an idea of the acceleration in this revolution, it took 2.5 years for Netflix to reach 1 million users. It took 2.5 months for Instagram to reach 1 million users. It only took 5 days for ChatGPT to reach 1 million users. Okay, so now about AI, there is the pessimistic and the optimistic view. The pessimistic view is that AI will produce very little growth, but will have very negative consequences on employment. My view and the view of the report is what we call a cautiously optimistic view. And the view is that AI has substantial growth potential and has also positive employment potential. But to harness this potential, you need to have appropriate policies and institutions. So AI in itself as a technology has a considerable growth and employment potential, but you can only realize that potential if you put in place the appropriate institutions and policies. So it's very different from the specific view that in itself the technology is doomed. Okay. So let me talk about AI and growth. Why should we believe that AI boosts productivity growth? We believe that AI boosts productivity growth because it automates tasks both in the production of goods and services, but also it automates tasks in the production of ideas. And I did some work with Ben Jones from Northwestern and Chad Jones from Stanford, modeling the fact that AI has both this boosting productivity growth in the production of goods and services and the productivity growth enhancing in the production of ideas. Why do we think that AI facilitates the production of ideas? Because it helps find solutions to complex problems. It facilitates imitation and learning. It can become self-improving. So, for example, there is to just get an idea that it's really about data and reality, not just theory. A first piece of work is by Eric Brynjolfsson and co-authors, and it's called Generative AI at Work. And in that paper, the authors look at a Fortune 500 company in the US. And it's a US Fortune 500 company that advises SMEs in the US, managers of SMEs in the US, on enterprise software. So what happens? You're a manager of a small and medium-sized enterprise in the US. You call this company and you say, well, I want to install software and I need advice. So, and usually you are directed to a Philippines employee, and they will try to solve your problem. And the way to measure agent productivity is by the number of resolutions of each employee per hour. Okay, and so what happened is that at first the Philippine employees didn't have access to ChatGPT, and eventually you provide access to ChatGPT, but the access was gradual, which means that there were first some employees that got access, and you can compare them with the productivity of similar employees in terms of experience, age, education, who didn't yet have access to ChatGPT. And you see that being granted access to ChatGPT increases the productivity of the Philippine employee by 14% after 1 month and by up to 25% after 2 months. And so it's a substantial productivity enhancing effect. So we see at the very micro level of this enterprise, when they adopted ChatGPT, it boosted productivity in that firm. Okay. Now, of course, this is micro, and you would like to go from micro to macro. One way is to extrapolate from previous technological revolution, in particular the electricity revolution or the IT revolution. Say, we know if we expect AI to be like those revolutions, what kind of growth increase of aggregate growth upsurge should we expect? Okay. And another approach is to adopt a task-based approach. We know that AI automates tasks in the production of goods and services in particular, given that which boost in productivity growth we should expect from AI. Okay, so let me start with the extrapolation method. You say, well, suppose we know that when you had the electricity revolution, for 10 years, when the revolution took off, you had 10 years of an increase in productivity growth in the US of around 1.3 percentage point per year. You see, so it means that if you were you're growing at 1% per year, you would be growing for 10 years at 2.3%. The IT revolution induce also a significant boost in productivity growth. If you are growing at 1% per year, you will be growing at 1.8% per year for 10 years when the IT revolution took off. Okay, so if we believe that AI is something in the range of between electricity and IT, we would have something of the range between 0.8 and 1.3% extra percentage points extra for 10 years of growth. Okay, so it would look like this. The evolution of potential GDP would be the dotted line without AI, and with AI for 10 years, you would have a steeper curve because you would grow faster with AI, and then after 10 years, you go back to the same slope as without AI, okay? But GDP is permanently increased, okay? And that means a lot of billions. In France, we calculated that it would be between 250 and 400 billion euros extra of income after 10 years, okay? So that's if you take the extrapolation approach. But another approach is to take the task-based approach. So for example, Acemoglu, who got the Nobel Prize this year, is among the Nobel Prize winners this year, he uses a task-based model that he developed with Pascal Restrepo to estimate the effect of AI on TFP. And he concludes to a much lower increase in growth induced by AI of only 0.07 percentage point per year for 10 years, 10 times less than what we would predict with using the extrapolation method. So what it does, I don't want to enter into the details, the TFP gains over 10 years, it depends, induced by AI, it depends, of course, on the GDP share of tasks that are exposed to AI. Then among those tasks, it depends on the share of tasks that are exposed, but for which it is indeed profitable to introduce AI. And then, of course, it all depends on the labor share and the labor cost savings enabled by AI, okay? And Acemoglu puts the figures on each of those, arriving to this very small number of 0.07% extra percentage points, okay? But in fact, what we argue in the report and in subsequent work is that we argue that those figures are very pessimistic. For example, Acemoglu uses for the share of tasks exposed to AI figures closed by Elundu or by Mirek, and in fact, the interval is much bigger. IMF, for example, is much, believes that there are many more tasks that are exposed to AI than what Acemoglu considers, okay? Another thing is that then if you move to among those exposed tasks, those for which AI is profitable, he looks at visual tasks exposed to AI, and he says that only 23% of them would be profitable to automate for American firms. But in fact, he doesn't take into account the fact that there is a technical progress, which implies that there is a cost reduction in the implementation of AI over time. And in fact, the paper that Acemoglu cites proposes 3 scenarios of cost reduction, which corresponds to the various curves. One scenario of an annual cost reduction of 10%, another one of 20% per year, and another one of 50%, leading to 30, 50, and 80% of visual tasks exposed to AI that would be profitable after a 20-year period. So many more. So the interval to consider is 23%, which is the lower bound that Acemoglu considered, and 80%. And still there, I'm being pessimistic because we focus on visual tasks, but there are, for example, other tasks, for example, capability of understanding writing or languages, for which progress in the field of computer progress has been much faster than in the in visual tasks. Okay. Finally, the labor cost enabled by savings. Acemoglu takes the average of a paper by Noy and Zhang and the short-term Brynjolfsson effect of 14%, and gets at 27. But in fact, you should take at the very minimum the average between Noy and Zhang and what Brynjolfsson and et al. Get after 2 months, the increase in productivity that they get of 25%. And then you will get an interval of 33% to 40%. So overall, if we take seriously the literature, the empirical literature, we conclude that annual productivity growth increase induced by AI should lie in the interval between 0.08 percentage point per year for 10 years and 1.24 percentage point. And the scenario that we believe in is an increase in productivity growth of 0.68, which is like almost 0.7, 10 times as much as what Acemoglu predicts. So you see, what's very interesting is that when you take seriously the data, you get the 2 methods, the task-based and the extrapolation method gives you a similar range of magnitude. You have at least 0.7 extra percentage point of growth for 10 years induced by AI. And here still, I do not take into account the fact that AI not only automates the production of productivity in the production of goods and services, but also AI automates tasks in the production of ideas. And there is, so in fact, if I take that into account, you see, if you just take into account the fact that AI automates tasks in the production of goods and services, you would have, instead of the dotted curve, the red curve, as I said. But in fact, you have the blue curve because AI boosts, improves the innovation technology. So that means that you grow even more during the first 10 years. And in the long run, you will permanently grow faster than you would without AI because you have improved forever the innovation technology thanks to AI, you see. So for example, there is a very recent paper by Aidan Turner Rogers, who is an MIT student, called Artificial Intelligence, Scientific Discovery and Product Innovation. And in that paper, this student, who is on the job market this year, exploits the randomized introduction of an AI tool for materials discovery in a lab of 1,000 scientists in a large US firm. So it's a large US firm who is about introducing new materials, and you have the R&D lab of that firm, and they are progressively granted access to AI, okay? And so the lab focuses on applications of material science to healthcare, optics, and industrial manufacturing. So in fact, the author uses detailed data on each stage of R&D and looks at AI's impact on materials discovery and the downstream effects of this discovery on patenting and product innovation. So first, you discover many possibilities of new materials, you visualize them, and then you patent some of them, and then some of them lead to actual product innovation, okay? And what he finds is that he compares, again, because you have gradual introduction of AI in this R&D lab, you can compare the productivity of scientists who have access to AI to productivity of similar scientists who don't have access to AI. And you see that access to AI increases the number of new materials that you can figure out visually by 44%. It decreases patent filing by 39.4%, and it increased the resulting product prototypes by 70.2%. So you really see AI in action here, facilitating, improving, increasing the productivity in the production of ideas, in the production of new innovations. Okay, so that's the upside of AI. AI has a growth potential both because it automates tasks in the production of goods and services, because it automates tasks in the production of ideas. But there is a downside, and the downside is here. If you look at the average TFP growth, total factor productivity growth in the US, the average annual total factor productivity growth in the US, it was boosted, it soared up between 95 and 2005, but then you had a significant growth decline since the 2005 in the US. Why? You had that, it was particularly true. It's because the IT revolution boosted growth, but it led to the emergence of superstar firms, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Walmart, and those firms expanded in particular through merger and acquisition. So first, they carried the growth process. They boosted growth because they were very well, they knew how to harness the power of IT. But eventually, because they could do a merger and acquisition without any limit, they became pervasive, they became hegemonic, and they ended up discouraging entry of new firms. And you can see here the rate of entry of new firms of below 1,000 employees, or between 1,000 and 10,000 employees, or above 10,000 employees. Entry of all kinds of firms in the US has gone down since the 2000, what you can see here, the downside, the downward sloping entry profiles. Okay, so it means that the problem is that you had the IT revolution, but because you did not adapt competition policy to the IT revolution, in particular, we did not regulate merger and acquisitions properly. We let firms expand through merger and acquisition without bothering about potential negative effects on entry and innovation of those of such merger and acquisitions. You had this negative effect of the IT revolution on growth eventually. Okay, and here you can see, by the way, the average markup of US firms goes up. That's the red curve, but it's not so much because within firms the markup went up. That's the blue curve, is a within firm average markup. It's because you have a reallocation effect, which is depicted by the black curve, is that the high markup firms, which were the superstar firms, became more pervasive, in fact, in particular through merger and acquisitions. Okay, so the why is that important? It's important because, in fact, AI overall has a high growth potential, but inappropriate competition policy may hamper that potential, may inhibit that potential in the same way that it inhibited the growth potential of the IT revolution. And why is that a problem? Because the cloud, the upstream segments of the AI value chains, in particular the cloud, are dominated by three superstar firms right away: Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and you have only one big actor, GPU, on the market for graphic processors. So it's very important, and that's a big part of the report. You need to have competition policy. So competition policy in the report is, we are for open AI. We think it's for to have open AI access. We are in favor of the Digital Market Act, which you have in Europe to make sure that incumbents share their data and things. We are in favor of extending the Digital Market Act to all the segments of the AI value chain. And we are also, when it comes to regulation, in Europe, we tend to have many regulations. Some of them are very helpful, but when you have too many regulations, the large firms know how to deal with them. The small firms, the new potential entrants particularly, do not know how to deal with them. So you have to regulate appropriately, but not too much, because otherwise it favors the big firm, the big incumbents. So we have a whole set of also data access. We believe that it should be facilitated. For example, for that's regulation for health. We think that in France, it used to be very hard for researchers to access health data. We are in favor of having a kind of ex post approach to monitoring access to data, rather than a pure ex ante approach. So we have a series of proposals in the report that are there to foster competition, because we believe that in the absence of appropriate competition, you have the growth potential of AI may be inhibited, okay, may be hindered, okay, and that's the whole first leg of the report, okay. So now I get to AI and employment. So in previous work with Céline Antonin, Simon Bunel, Xavier Jaravel, we looked at the effect on employment of automation. And we use comprehensive French firm level data, and we compared the evolution of employment in firms that automate to the evolution of employment in similar firms that do not automate, okay? And we found that automation had a positive effect on employment, okay? And whether we measure that by investment in industrial equipment or by robotization or various measures of automation. And the reason is because, in fact, when you automate, it's true that you substitute some jobs, some manpower by machines, but on the other hand, firms that automate become more productive, therefore they become more competitive, therefore the world market demand for their products increases, and therefore they employ more. And this productivity effect more than counteracts the substitution effect. And so that's a kind of very important conclusion. Now, is that different from AI? So there, for the purpose of the report, we use an annual survey covering 9,000 representative firms, and we compare between employment in firms that adopt some AI between 2018 and 2020 and similar firms that do not adopt AI. So we have a treatment group and a control group, okay? And what we find is that overall, exactly like for automation and robotization, AI firms that adopt AI overall increase employment, okay? And that's, in fact, is a very robust finding. We are now finding similar finding now with Danish data. And even we have instruments, we can instrument the adoption of AI. For example, we know that if you have a spouse who works in a firm that adopted AI, you are more likely to adopt AI. So we use family and network connections to instrument for the adoption of AI. And we find this causal effect really of AI adoption on employment, okay? Exactly on the Danish data, exactly the way we found them for French data. But what's interesting is that it's not uniform across all jobs. So for example, administrative services, legal services, sales, there you don't find similar a positive effect. And so that's what's interesting, is because in fact it links very much to a study by the International Labour Office that decomposes jobs into tasks. And what they do is they say, well, a job is a series of tasks, and what you can do is you can give a small score for tasks that have a small replacement risk by AI, a middle score for tasks that are a medium replacement risk by AI, and a high score for tasks that are very likely to be replaced by AI, okay? And that's drawn from their paper. If you look at the upper panel, those are all managerial jobs. If you can read the lines, it's managers in services, managers in financial and insurance services, management in sports, management in aquaculture, manager in advertising. What you see is that most of the tasks are in the blue, black blue, dark blue, which is the low replacement risk. And some of them here have a high replacement risk, but most of the tasks are there, which the ideal is to be at the very top, because it means that some tasks will be replaced, which will free, which will liberate, which will release time to concentrate on more creative tasks. So for managers, it's very good news to have the AI, because few tasks might be replaced, but most of the tasks are not. If you look now at clerical support workers, there many tasks are high risk of replacement, and you see in particular those jobs there, you might think that they are at risk because most tasks are likely to be replaced. And in fact, you could here map out different type of jobs according to a horizontal line, the share of tasks unlikely to be replaced. So if you're more to the left, you have a higher share of tasks likely to be replaced. And up and down, the more when you move upward, you have a higher degree of exposition to AI. And you see that the jobs here on that graph, the jobs most at risk are secretary, telesale, accountant. Those are jobs that looks to be at risk. The other jobs, either they have a high share of tasks unlikely to be replaced, or they are not highly exposed to AI. So if you will trust that curve, you would say, well, I start from accountant, telesale, secretary. Those jobs you would see at risk. And then when you get there, those jobs are not at risk. But in fact, this is a pessimistic curve, because further work that we've just done, and I could send the paper, we find that the labor demand response to AI is positive, even for occupations like accountant, telemarketers, and secretaries, suggesting that which were classified to be high likely to be replaced, and suggesting that the productivity effect outweighs the displacement effect even from these occupations. Yet, in fact, what happens is that certain use of AI lead to positive employment growth, like ICT security, but other uses, administrative processes, have small negative effects. So it's true that some jobs will have some aspects of AI with positive effect and some aspect of AI with negative effect. But in fact, the share of jobs that are really at risk is very, very small. We estimate that share at less than 5%. And in fact, I believe it's much less than 5%. So there is no such thing for us as an existential risk of AI. We think that very few jobs are at risk, but mean that many jobs will have to be rethought with AI. And a big part of the report is on the training on AI and education, how you at kindergarten level, at school level, and then at university level, in all programs, you introduce AI, where you have AI coffee shops, to really diffuse AI, and so that we all become familiar with AI in our life, in our work. But we don't feel that there is an existential risk of AI. So the overall conclusion so far is that there is no existential risk. We don't see mass unemployment resulting from AI. In fact, all previous revolutions, there was always the fear that they would lead to mass unemployment. Like, for example, the steam engine, you had the Luddites movement in England because workers were afraid to lose their job due to the steam engine revolution, and no such thing happened. Then you had the electricity revolution, and Keynes was predicting mass unemployment as a result of that revolution, which we never saw, because in each instance, in each case, you had this productivity, this competitiveness effect, more counteracting the substitution effect. And it's the case also here with AI. But you need appropriate institution and policy to enhance the employment creation potential of AI. So first, we believe that you need adequate education system. It's at school that you learn to learn. It's at school that you learn to adapt to new situations. But you need good school system with good PISA tests, good test scores, you see. And then on top of this good education system, you need to adequate labor market policies. For example, Denmark is a case in point. In Denmark, when you lose your jobs, it's our colleague Alexandra Roulet from INSEAD, and you know her, you know Alexandra. She compared the health of a worker in a firm that closes down to the health of a similar worker in age, experience, education in the firm that does not close down. And what she finds is that the probability to purchase, it's a difference in difference. I compare before and after the closing down, the health of the worker in the firm that closes down to the health of a similar worker in a firm that does not close down. But you see no effect of losing the job on the purchase of antidepressants. I mean, the worker in the firm that closes down compared to the worker that in the firm that does not close down does not experience extra probability to purchase antidepressants after the closing down. Similar, no effect on the probability to visit hospital for circulatory problem, and no effect on mortality. So in Denmark, they found a good system to deal with, the fact of moving from job to job and retraining, because they pay you 90% of your salary for 2 years when you lose your job, and the state helps you retrain and helps you find a new job. That's the Danish system. In the US, there is no such thing. You are left on your own. You are at risk of losing your health insurance. Nobody helps you to retrain. You have very stingy unemployment insurance, and then what you get is the Anke-Sanges-Deaton curve. Mortality has increased of unskilled middle-aged significantly. That's this black curve, because they are under increasing stress, and they take opioids, sleeping pills, they eat pizzas all the time, and the mortality rate has gone up. And so that's whereas Denmark doesn't have that problem. You see, so the general conclusion is that if you want that AI has both growth and job creation potential, to harness the growth potential, you need to adapt competition policy, to reform competition policy, and to harness the job creation potential of AI, you need to reform education policy and to have active labor market policy. What I call, in particular, the flex security system of Denmark is, for me, a model system. Okay, so more generally, I mean, the conclusion is that I believe that you need both competition and industrial policy. Okay, so to foster competition, I say open source, ease data access, extend the DMA to the whole value chain of AI, avoid excessive regulation. But at the same time, we need to facilitate entry. It's not just rules. It's also to make it easier for specialized AI innovators to prosper and grow, it's very good to facilitate access to computing power. That's why we recommend that in France, that the French government co-invest with private sector in computing power. We also need to invest in AI diffusion, and we advocate an AI exception in public research funding, which would be easier for researchers to do part-time in public in universities and part-time in private sector. So because otherwise they will go all to the US where they have good salaries. The salaries are not great in the French public sector, but at least we should allow them to have the possibility of hybrid jobs between university and private. But also we should have special grants for promising AI researchers in France. So that's why we call the AI exception. So you see, we need both competition and investment in computing power, AI diffusion, and research. And so we are. That's the report. You see what I mean? A training plan. Massive investment in computing power, facilitate data access, the AI exception in research, and then finally, to facilitate AI diffusion worldwide, we are in favor of a new governance of AI worldwide. Okay, and that will be the subject of the summit, which my co-president is chairing. She is the organizer. Anne Vouvreau was my co-president on this commission, and she is precisely in charge of organizing the next AI summit, which will be held at Élysée Palace in February. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for the great presentation. I think we have some excellent questions in the Q&A box. Let me just start with some of them. So, so anonymous attendee asks, like, why we are still looking at GDP as the North Star of the progress? Shouldn't we be looking at how to create a more responsible, equitable, sustainable world? And what sort of metrics maybe we should be looking at with GDP growth?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, the answer to that, I mean, is that I, of course, agree that GDP is not an exhaustive measure. What we are after is quality of life. We want to improve quality. So, but it's true that GDP, money doesn't make people happy, but money helps people be happy. I mean, Angus Deaton and Daniel Kahneman wrote a very important paper showing that, life satisfaction tends to be higher in countries with higher per capita GDP. I mean, it's not automatic, but so money doesn't automatically induce happiness. But when you are poor, it's much harder to be happy. But still, you're absolutely right. You need to improve. That's why I'm in favor of green innovation. Particularly, we've not talked about AI and on the environment. AI is very intensive in using energy, but AI can also help optimize on the use of scarce resources. So there is this whole topic of AI and environment. But so I agree fully that GDP growth does not fully capture what we are after, which is improvement in quality of life. But still, it's a reflection. It's one of the measures. The other one is innovation rate, is innovation intensity. So that's another measure. You see, if you innovate more, that reflects the fact that you have somehow faster growth in quality. But so you don't have only one measure, you have several measures. But what's interesting is that AI boosts innovation rate as much as it boosts also GDP growth. But we should look for other measures as well, of course.
Thank you. I wanted to start with this excellent question, but I have a question of my own. So you talked about the competition policy and the France should have an open policy, an open way of creating AI.
Yeah.
But a lot of people also kind of bring forward a lot of security concerns and the benefits of owning the whole value chain, especially in this kind of geopolitical environment. So how do you balance these concerns with the?
Yeah, so I think of course, we should not ignore the security concerns, but that's why we need some regulations. I'm not in favor of total deregulation. I am in favor of adequate regulation, but we should avoid over-regulating, because if we over-regulate, the big ones get their way. You see what I mean? They get away with it, and the small don't. And so one has to be careful to find the right regulations. I think we need to go there to trade, don't go for number of regulations, go for the quality of the regulations, and make sure that you are not hampering the potential of AI by over regulating. That's, I think, is but of course there were the scandals, Hollywood and other scandals where you had clearly under regulation, and so you have to, that's what we had in the commission, a very good person, Alexandra Ben Samoun, who looked at all the property rights aspect, the legal aspects of AI, and they're very important. So that's why you have to strike a right balance between the need to protect and but also the fact we don't want to kill the potential of AI. And we don't want to kill competition.
Thank you. Still on the topic of regulation, anonymous attendee asked, like, what are some specific regulations you think is hampering innovation in EU? Because we talk a lot about a lot of over-regulation in the EU, and then that's something that's a main topic when it comes from technology in EU. So do you want to talk any specific?
Yeah, no, I don't want that, because you see, the report was not really about criticizing. There is the AI Act. Some people have thought there were too many regulations in the AI Act. I don't want here to take issue with the AI Act. Okay, so maybe it can be improved, but I don't think. No, I prefer to be, and we chose in this report to not take a position on the AI, on the European AI Act.
Understood. Another popular question is that when we talk about AI, the market leaders is like OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, but we also have Mistral as one of the leaders in the French. So who are the other French and European actors you would kind of predict will become AI leaders?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want here to advocate to do publicity, for such and that. But for example, Mistral is a firm that is doing well. There are other firms that are also there. There will be others. You see, so there are. And really, what I believe is a country like France can really do well in specialized AI in areas where we have good data. You see, for example, on health, we have very good health data. And so that's why we need to ease researchers' access to health data, because otherwise we cannot take advantage of the fantastic health data that we have. And you know that AI has fantastic applications in health already. I think we have areas in France like health or others where we are good, and we should develop access to computing power to help those specialized users of AI to be developed. I think that's
So another question is that in your presentation we see some exponential growth, and we've also seen from OpenAI, Microsoft, and NVIDIA some sort of graph which is exceeding the Moore's law in terms of the efficiency gains and in AI. So one of the questions from which Robert asked is he was expecting some sort of S curve in terms of AI revolution. Maybe the progress tapers at some point, and we don't get the gains from the scaling laws. So what do you think? When at which point do we have that tapering?
I don't know. I mean, there's been always the idea that ideas become eventually harder to find. You see, I mean, that Moore's law, you need to double the number of transistors per chip to, and now it takes more researchers to double the number of transistors per chip than it used to. And so that, pointing at the idea that ideas are harder to find today than they were before. I believe that AI makes ideas easier to find. I mean, I gave you the example of this US firm, materials, specialized in materials. We saw how access to AI would make it easier for them to invent, to discover new materials. So AI certainly is something, a revolution that will make ideas easier to find, I believe. And so boost the innovation process. Another thing I would like to tell you is that the Moore's law, by the way, we thought it was important to double the number of transistors per chip, but you can dispose differently the transistors. And in fact, the AI revolution was a lot generated by just really rearranging the transistors. You see what I mean? So you don't need to double the number of transistors all the time. You can just find ways to rearrange them. So recombine, and AI helps you recombine better and better. So I think that that I'm more of an pessimist. My pessimist side, where I'm less optimistic is the fact that shall we be able to reform our institutions, in particular competition policy, to fully exploit the growth potential of AI. I'm not very worried that that AI will have a limited growth potential. I'm more worried that from a pure technological point of view, I'm more worried about the fact, you see, growth is the joint result of technology and institutions. And I don't know if we will be able to adapt our institutions to the technology sufficiently fast. Well, that's more my worry, you see, than the technological limits.
Another excellent question from anonymous attendee. So, in any kind of technology revolution, we see a lot of complementary technologies moving forward together. So, we have seen a lot of advances in robotics driven by this kind of machine learning and generative AI advances.
Yeah.
So, do you think that those numbers and studies we talked about decreasing unemployment, would you maybe study that again, kind of looking at complementary technologies like robotics and AI together?
Yeah, that's right. But I don't see. But I'm not pessimistic. Once again, I don't. I mean, there are some jobs that will be threatened by AI and by the. But my feeling is that there are much less of them than we can think. And I mentioned these studies that we've done recently, showing that these are particularly certain use of AI that may have small negative effect. But many users of AI, even on jobs where you think that most of the tasks will be replaced, overall AI in fact, it turns out to have a positive effect overall on employment in those jobs. So I am on that optimistic. But once again, if we want to maximize the employment impact of AI, we need to adapt our policies and institutions. And that's where I think about the education system and the labor market policies. If you have a good education system and you have a good Danish type of labor market system, I think you can be very confident. You can really face that revolution in full confidence.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of education, an anonymous attendee asked, like, how we as kind of knowledge workers would want to educate ourselves properly on AI, because, of course, the nature of work is changing a lot, and in the next 5 years, maybe we will work very differently. So, what are the key trends you see that we should be following as knowledge workers, as consultants, researchers, etc.?
So sorry. So what is the question then? Sorry.
Question is like how we can educate ourselves and where the kind of key trends are going in terms of how we are going to work, our ways
Yeah,
of
that's
working.
right. So so I think education comes from. I think we should have more. We have a whole part in the report where we say it's important, of course, to familiarize ourselves with AI since a young age, and at university in the various curricula. There is AI for medicine, AI for law. That should be taught. That should be part of the programs. And so it's important to really diffuse AI in enterprises, to also have social dialogue in enterprises boosted by AI. I think it would be much easier within firms for employees and unions to be informed about what goes on in the firm, about the decision making in the firm once with AI. I think AI can really boost social dialogue as well, because it will be much easier for them to access the information about how the firm is being managed and things, and where it's going and where. So I think that's but of course it all depends which use you make of AI. So if it's AI for bad jobs, that's not good. You want AI to favor good jobs and to favor also a culture within the firm, you see, and that I think, government and civil society have a role to play there. Both government and civil society, the unions, the media, and government can reward firms that provide training to their workers, that enhance their soft skills, etc. You see, so that I think I believe very much in the triangle between firms, government, and civil society. Firms innovate, the firms produce, but government and civil society direct the new technologies or induce firms to make the better use of the new technologies, you see. And that's I think is an important idea that goes beyond AI. It's also good true for green innovation. Governments and civil society helps redirect innovation towards greener technologies. Firms would not necessarily spontaneously do that.
Yeah, coming to that point, that's also another very popular point in the Q&A. So in the last 2 years from the GPT moment, we see that all the top companies building their capacity and data centers and all that, and maybe kind of falling behind in their net zero pledges. So how do you think that the government or kind of other kind of bodies can re-engage them in the ESG risk or other kind of climate risk that is coming with AI?
So I think that yeah. So AI. I think, for example, if you build a local computing power, you reduce a bit the energy intensity of AI. So I think that can have already an impact. You see what I mean? You don't want anybody to be relying on the same centralized computing center. That I think is not good in terms of energy efficiency. That's not good. So that's where, industrial policy to build local computing power can be also helpful in mitigating the negative environmental effects of AI. So that I think is important. The tools that you have at hand is always a mixture of regulation and subsidies and industrial policy. And those are the kind of basic tools that government have at their hand. I mean, a mixture of, for example, for green carbon tax and green industrial policy are the things that you should use together if you want to induce greenification. And to redirect technical change towards green technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the same to redirect AI use towards green, you see. By the way, it's very, very interesting because many firms are subject to what I call the past dependence problem. I mean that if you have innovated in dirty technologies in the past, you tend to continue spontaneously to innovate in dirty technology in the future. And I believe that AI can help firms overcome this past dependence problem. There is a kind of switching cost. There is a kind of hysteresis. You are blocked with the status quo bias. And I believe that the AI can help overcome the status quo bias.
But you would say the economic incentives are what will drive the adoption. So we see a lot
the economic incentive will drive the adoption, but they are shaped also by government and civil society. Do you see what I mean? They are not. Yeah. For example, if I didn't have a carbon tax at all, nobody would have an incentive to innovate green. You see, you need something like a carbon tax, or maybe it can be consumers' demand for green that also plays that role. You see, so that you have that. But on top of that, it's good to have to subsidize or to encourage firms that innovate green, like what the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is doing, for example. That's green industrial policy. So I think in Europe, we tend to privilege carbon tax, and in the US, more like green industrial policy. I believe that you need both, actually. You need the carrot and the stick, in a sense.
Yeah, talking more about that. So we see a lot of the US top companies having some sort of a fight with the kind of the Europe regulations. How do you think these kind of policies or recommendations would be, how we can make them accept this sort of this sort of model?
That's a big problem. There is a Draghi report. Mario Draghi rang the alarm clock, the alarm bell, because he said, well, since the 1990s, the gap between per capita GDP US and per capita GDP EU has widened up. Why? Because you had the IT revolution, and the European, we didn't fully, we did not fully take advantage of the IT revolution. Okay, so and while the US is special, is really into frontier high-tech innovations. Europe is stuck in low mid-tech non-incremental innovation. So we need to do something about this, and we need to make sure that we won't miss the AI revolution the way we missed in large part the IT revolution. So that's why he said, well, there are several things you should do. First, you need an integrated market. We don't have an integrated good and services market because each country adds its own regulation to European regulation. So you need a truly unified good market for goods and services. Second thing, we don't have a good financial ecosystem. Venture capital is crucial for startups. Then you have institutional investors that boost innovation in larger firms. We don't have anything of the like in Europe. We have very underdeveloped venture capital market, and we have very few institutional investors, and also we don't allow enough securitization of bank loans. Too much of it leads, of course, can generate the financial crisis that we had in 2008. But between no securitization and the excessive level that led to the crisis, there is a good middle range, and we can also do. So there is this whole part in the Draghi report on developing the financial ecosystem of innovation. And then you have policies like industrial policy. You have the DARPA, the Defense Advanced Project Agency in the US in defense, but you have the equivalent in energy, the APA Energy, and in biotech, the BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, which is a pro-competition way to do industrial policy. We don't have that in Europe, and we don't have a good ecosystem of basic innovation to finance basic research as we have in the US. So on all those grounds, we can improve. You see what I mean? And that's what the Draghi report is recommending.
Thank you, Professor Philippe. So that's all for the questions we're going to take today. So if you want to wrap up and have some final thoughts for our audience, you're welcome to share.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.